Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jonathan Anthon. I am going to be your host today. Before we dive in, I just want to take a couple housekeeping notes. I do see that we have a lot of you active in the chat, so that is good to see, as well as connecting with us a variety of different ways as we go through putting this on for you and hopefully getting you some great information regarding everything that's going on and how you might be able to help your business and continue to move forward. So we are joined today. I've got a couple of industry experts and some folks that are experts in their field to help you with some great information. We're going to give it a couple more minutes for folks to join us before we get rolling, and then we're going to get started. So thank you again for joining, and we will be ready to roll for you very soon. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. One of our folks is having some technical difficulties, but we'll catch up with them later. Again, welcome everybody. So I want to give you a little bit of background on our panel today, and then we'll go ahead and dive in and start asking some questions of these folks so they can share their expertise and really help you navigate through what is obviously a challenging and different time for all of us. So my name is Jonathan Anthon. Many of you may recognize me as I've been in the NEMT space for a little while. I've been on a little bit of a hiatus recently because of some restrictions that have been on me, unfortunately. Luckily, those have expired just in time to be able to do this, so I was encouraged to do this by a few different people, and frankly, I'm honored and flattered that folks kind of thought of me as someone that could bring this type of information to you and bring together a group of folks that really understand this business and really have an understanding of what you are going through as an NEMT provider today. So I'm thrilled to be here back with you today and to work with you guys to help you survive and thrive through this situation. So it looks like Eric has joined us. So I'd like to briefly go through and introduce each of our panelists today. The first is Eric Lane. Eric is from Baker's Insurance. He's one of the foremost insurance experts when it comes to insurance and risk mitigation in non-emergency medical transportation. He'll be discussing some of the insurance implications and best practices, as well as some risk mitigation in case of a future crisis like this. I also have Gary Yuzbashev. Gary is the owner of Buffalo Transportation, Western New York Bus Company, ISI Technology, and Route Genie. He'll be able to give us kind of a provider's perspective and a little bit of a technology perspective on the crisis. I also, and lastly, have Danielle Burton. Danielle is an account executive with Ring Central out of Charlotte, North Carolina. Ring Central specializes in communication tools, including virtual phone systems, team chat, virtual meetings, and a lot more. So she's going to provide some insight as to how you can prepare yourself for a more remote-friendly telecom situation, both for now and moving forward into the future. So before we dive in, I do want to mention a few other webinars that are going on that are kind of related. Last Friday, many of you know who Matt Doss is. Matt's one of the foremost experts in transportation, where you will get links to all the different webinars, his included, but there's just fantastic information in there. I highly recommend watching that. It's about 2 hours long, but you have some really, really well-qualified speakers giving you some fantastic information from a little bit of a regulatory and a legal perspective, and I think everybody should definitely check that out. Going on right now, there is actually another webinar as well that is related to some of the funding that may be coming due to the stimulus package, which we got some good news on this morning that looks like it's moving forward well. So that is happening now. So I will also include that in your information packets that you will get. And lastly, Maggie Adams, who's one of the predominant billing experts in our space, is going to be hosting webinars Thursday afternoons. I know she has some information on her LinkedIn, so I recommend checking that out. But that might help you a little bit with some billing practices and things you can do to make sure that you're getting your cash flow where it needs to be. That's going to be one of the more important things for you right now, especially as things get tougher and tougher. So we recommend checking out Maggie's webinars Thursday afternoons for the time being. So again, links with all of those coming in your recap, so you can check those out. You can watch the recordings and get some more awesome information from some others as well. So last thing, just a kind of another housekeeping announcement on the live chat. There is about a 10 to 15 second delay. We do encourage you to go ahead and post and ask questions. If you have questions of the panelists or about want to go into more detail about what we're talking about, you are more than welcome. I will try to get to as many of them as possible. Some of them we may address as we're going, if it kind of fits in well, or if not, we are going to have some Q&A at the end. So please don't fret if your question isn't answered. We'll try to get that squared away. So if looks like we're going to be able to get Eric joining us via video here. Hold on one moment so I can let him in. There he is. All right. Hello, Eric. All right, so we're actually going to start with Eric. So, Eric, welcome. How are you? Eric, I think we're having trouble catching you on the audio.
Oh God, I hate this stuff sometimes.
Hello. How are you?
This is your area of expertise, certainly not mine.
The technology. I mean, you've got the so Eric is the host of a podcast also called. So you say NEMT, or how do you pronounce it?
NEMT.
Yeah. So NEMT NEMT. However you get your podcast, whether it's Spotify, I saw it on there. I saw it on Apple. Check that out. It is an NEMT focused podcast that Eric hosts with industry experts, and he posts episodes pretty regularly. So definitely recommend checking that out. But Eric, thank you for joining us. So if you could just kind of start out and take me through what you're hearing from NEMT operators during this crisis and how you're responding to them.
Sure. So, I mean, this is definitely something that's impacting NEMT operators across the country. We haven't heard of anybody that's been spared by the coronavirus issues. We've heard about some really cool opportunities for revenue generation to continue. If you're not moving your typical passenger load, what we're seeing is what you're seeing is a lot of orders being fulfilled in the standing order dialysis, cancer treatment patient type trips, because that's not care that can be deferred, which is unfortunate and fortunate at the same time for operators. And so we're starting to see some other revenue sources that operators are pursuing. And a lot of that is following the lead of New York, and something that Matt Doss was able to share was some of those TLC drivers that are able to supplement the income that they're not receiving from normal passenger transport to delivering food to those people that are in need of it. And we're starting to see that begin to pick up as more cities, more states, more localities, despite whatever the federal government does, are echoing the call for the shelter in place. And so when you have seniors and those that are immunocompromised that are heeding the orders or heeding the recommendations of CDC and local healthcare organizations to stay in place, they still got to get food. Old people got to eat, young people got to eat, kids got to eat. And so that's something that we're seeing as an additional revenue stream. And when it comes to that question that I got recently from a client of mine was, how much do I charge? You don't charge. Do it for cost. At the end of the day, you're there to keep. You may not be bringing in income, but you're bringing in revenue that helps offset your expenses, because your expenses aren't sitting down. So that's one of the things that we're seeing, and it's really great to see the community kind of rally around that, recognizing that passenger transportation, ground transportation, is an essential service. And while you may not be able to transport your typical individuals or your typical members, or however you generate your revenue on an ongoing basis, we are seeing some of that loosen up for additional revenue streams.
Awesome. Yeah, I can echo that. I think those that have reached out to me and I've had an opportunity to chat with during this time, it's been very challenging for everybody, and it's good to see all the different groups that are stepping up and helping each other. And that's I think tremendous to see, and something that I think those of us that have worked in this space, all of us have come to expect. And nobody is surprised, simply because we know that that's the type of people that we work with, and that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
So, kind of turning to your expertise a bit, from an insurance perspective, I know this is something you've been working on, and I've heard that a lot of carriers are allowing fleets to remove coverage from an unused vehicle without turning in the plates. How much are you seeing that? Is that becoming a commonly accepted practice, or are just a few carriers doing that? How widespread is that practice?
I've seen it relatively widespread. There are a number of carriers that stepped up initially to enable what is essentially called a layup. And the fact of the matter is we've been doing it for years for school buses, because school buses don't run in the summer. And so there's no real need to charge premium for it. And instead of having the school bus companies just come in, turn plates in, and pick them back up every year, create that headache, the forms exist for the capability to lay those vehicles up without having to turn in the plates. Because if you have to turn in your plates, you got to pick them back up, because we know with 100% certainty that when this thing is done, the amount of deferred health care is going to just be an explosion for non-emergency medical transportation providers. And if you don't have to turn your plates in, and you're able to suspend coverage and suspend premium on those units that aren't generating revenue, it's a win for everybody involved. The majority of the carriers that we work with have stepped up to the plate and are doing the right thing by allowing that. And if they're not allowing it now, we anticipate them to be allowing it in the future. And when I say future, I mean expectation is that it'll be done by the end of the week. Some carriers have stepped up a little bit more than others. Some carriers have just kind of thrown caution to the wind and said, just do it, just take them off. We're not going to worry about it. The one that, what we wanted to avoid was changing coverage symbols. And again, this is inside baseball, but your coverage symbols exist for contractual requirements, and changing the coverage symbols just so that it's easier for the insurance carrier to do what they want to do is terrible customer service. And so we've been advocating from day one, when we realized that this was much more widespread than just an imported disease, that it was going to impact this business in a big way, for the ability to lay those vehicles up and keep the plates.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad to hear that the businesses and the insurance carriers are responding appropriately and helping people out as much as they can, because I agree. I think the amount of deferred medical care we're going to have, plus additional folks that are going to need transportation for something new, that are suffering from this, that may have lingering effects. Those two things combined are going to lead to a lot of demand, and I think the industry is going to have to be able to respond very quickly.
That's right.
I would like to add to insurance, if I might. I'm first-hand experienced insurance issues in my company, for example, where some carriers would allow us to keep the plates, but then yet they want to charge us 25% of the premium. And when other insurer companies would completely say, you know what, go surrender the plates. And the companies that would allow you to keep the plates and still charge you 25% for the premium, they want you to sign a guarantee that those vehicles will not be utilized for any transportation. They'll be parked. And any accidents happen, while they're not charging us, we'll be reliable personally for it. So that's what I've experienced so far. I have not yet experienced from anybody to give me 100% break. So this way they prompt me to go and surrender my plates. Otherwise, why would anybody want to pay 25% for a premium when 85% of your fleet is down and you have hundreds of vehicles that your premiums are, So I think it's very important for the provider to pay attention, to make sure that the carrier will actually honor the agreement and will compensate all 100%. I'll give them a break or pay at the end of the year or however, but make sure they don't charge them.
Absolutely. And like you said, and I think the important part there is that there's no consistency, and it's carrier by carrier. Like I said, we've seen some that have just said, all right, that's cool, don't use them. But that's the other key piece to that is if you're going to lay up a vehicle, you can't use it, regardless of whether or not they're going to charge you 25% or 100%. If they're going to give you any credit for it, and part of the agreement is you can't use them, don't use them.
And I think I know for those of you, again, I encourage you to go back and watch Matt's presentation from last week, but one of the things that his coalition asked for was the ability to lay up vehicles with no charges. So that's something that I know the coalition has asked to be mandated, that the insurance companies do that. So hopefully we'll get some action on that at the industry level to be able to help everybody out, so you don't have that inconsistency that Eric, you just mentioned. A couple notes from the chat. I know you guys can't see the YouTube chat. We're streaming live on YouTube here. Howard Berkowitz indicated Lancer is charging 30%, so very in line with what Gary was talking about. And Hiran mentioned the banks are raising concerns about taking them off of insurance. So that might be maybe where some of the pushback is maybe concerns from the banks. So that definitely makes sense. One
thing to note there, and it's a really good distinction. So whoever raised that question, nice one. What's being laid up is the liability coverage. The majority of the time, you can't suspend comp and collision, particularly if they are financed vehicles, because even if they're sitting in the yard, there's still a risk of physical damage. And so that's another important nuance to make sure that you're understanding is you're not necessarily removing them from the policy. That's the big piece here. Is what you're doing is you're suspending coverage while leaving them on the policy. And that's where the nuance comes of, they were leaving them on there. The filing is staying in place, but you still can't use them. And so that's part of what the issue here is to streamline once things come back online, that the filing is still in place for those vehicles, and just the liability premium, the liability coverage was suspended. As for comp and collision, that's going to be specific to the carrier as well. The majority of the time, the banks won't permit that coverage to be suspended. But when we're looking at the total expense for physical damage, it's generally substantially less than what the liability premium is.
Yep. And actually, Kevin just commented, could the carriers keep physical damage in place and forgive the liability? And that sounds like, because I could imagine as a bank, if I were in their shoes, I could certainly understand I wouldn't want the that vehicle can still get damaged whether or not it's on the road, right? A tree could fall on that vehicle. Someone else could drive into that vehicle in a driveway. So if I were lending money on that vehicle, I would want it to be protected from physical damage. But I think Kevin's point makes a lot of sense. So hopefully, I know you're on the forefront of this and working on behalf of the providers. So hopefully, something can come to fruition to help ease everybody's burdens here and make this as easy on everybody as possible.
Yeah.
I would like to also add, for people maybe if they don't know, they can take the plates to DMV and place them on hold versus suspending the plates, completely turn them in. You can put them on hold, and I believe they're doing up to 40 days right now. So if you place your plates on hold, you've been given a form which you submit to your insurance carrier. Your vehicle will be removed from your insurance, that if your vehicle is paid for, so there is no bank involved. And this way, once everything goes back to normal, you can go back to the same DMV, pick up your plates, and put them back on your vehicle. It expedites the process. In case if you have a fleet of 200 vehicles, there's going to be a huge shortage of plates at the DMVs, and there's going to be an issue. So if you want to do that, you can place them on hold for 40 days, and after 40 days, they'll be automatically destroyed if you don't come back to pick them up.
And obviously, that's New York State. Every state might be a little bit different, so we all obviously recommend you all check out your individual states with anything DOT, obviously. Gary, this Jim Dispenza has a question that you might have an answer to. If you put your plates on hold, do you have to get the vehicles DOT'd again before going back on the road?
No, you don't. As long as the DOT is still active, you don't need to. We just received a notification from DOT. They will not be passing DOTs currently in the state of New York. And they don't know how they're going to behave on a vehicle that already expired. So I'm assuming they're going to let it fly for now. But if you take the plates from the vehicle, you replace the plates, but the DOT is still active, All you have to do, you have to contact your DOT inspector and update the plates on the form.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for that. And it's something I wouldn't have known. So that's good info. Jim, thank you for the question. All right. Eric, any other tips and tricks you can provide for NEMT providers in regards to their insurance during something like this?
Yeah, I mean, strap safe. Don't have losses right now. I mean, the concern at this point is how certain coverages are going to respond. I fully expect there to be a substantial amount of litigation that follows this, and some changes in the way that certain coverages are applied. You've got a number of jurisdictions right now that are advocating for business income coverage to kick in here when generally it would be excluded. You've got something going on in the New Jersey House that would require it. There's discussion amongst some agencies in the federal government that insurance carriers have the ability to adjudicate claims quickly, more quickly than the federal government does. So when we're talking about business income coverage, we're starting to hear rumors about that. The more important thing here is how we come out of it, and I think we're going to get into that later. So I'm going to hold that for the time being.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for all of your insight. We're actually going to come back to Eric. Eric is working on some things with different groups in the industry regarding risk mitigation moving forward. So we're going to come back to Eric at the end and kind of wrap up with some of the things that Eric is working on there. But let's move over to Gary. I have some questions for you. I'll pull up your get you as the primary video here. There we are. So Gary, from a provider's perspective, how has the event impacted your business? I'm sure everybody is probably seeing something somewhat similar, but I think it would be good for everyone just to know that they're not alone in this. Gary, I think your audio is muted.
Okay, there
we go.
Sorry.
No problem.
As everybody else, we were affected, and our business approximately 85% down, give and take. So we had to take a lot of measurements to do everything we can to stay in business, and wait until everything blows over, and hopefully we go back to normal. I'll speak on safety and what we try to do in order to limit exposure of our employees to COVID-19. So what we did, we removed as many people as possible from our main office and people working from home. Okay, we do have a couple of people coming in and out of our office. We're trying to make it that it's going to be one person or two people at a time at the same time in the office. They sit in separate offices, so at least that hopefully will help. We have some products we obtained through local vendors, the chemicals to clean the office, spray. We completely got rid of the system. We collect the signatures from our clients. We used to collect them on the paper. Now we don't. We have an electronic system. We collect them electronically, so we believe that will help a lot. Also, our drivers are trained how to behave in the situation. They're all equipped with gloves, sanitizers. They all have masks. And we have a cleaning crew daily that cleans and sprays our vehicles with the chemicals, which I mentioned before, we obtained through our local vendors. So that's what we're trying to do to prevent the spread as much as possible, of course. I would like to add something to Eric. He was also mentioning different avenues of right now for us. For us, I'm saying transportation providers, non-emergency medical transportation providers, to get additional revenues. I just want to share this with you. Hopefully it will help someone. I was contacted by a couple of MLTCs asking me if our company can provide COVID-19 transportation for the people that were diagnosed and people that have been released from hospitals. So what they do is they allocate the vehicle. The vehicle has to be monitored, cleaned with special chemicals. The chemicals are being provided by the state. Well, from the MLTCs. The MLTCs gets it from the state, I believe. They gives it to a special uniform the costumes for the driver, mask, head mask, special glasses, so the driver is completely safe. And they're asking us to help. And the reason why this is I think it's very important, and our company will do everything possible to do it, as long as I find people willing to do it. So we don't have to put the burden so much on emergency fleet. So people can do what they have to do for an emergency purposes. So we can transport the people with COVID-19 in regular vehicles that are actually fine. They can be transported to their home to stay in confinement versus transporting by the emergency vehicles. So I think that's very important right now. It's been introduced in New York City, primarily where a lot of non-emergency medical transportation companies trying to help. So as you mentioned before, Eric, I believe this is just something you have to do to help. And I believe that goes a long way. We'll help a lot if we'll help the emergency transportation, because there's not enough ERs out there, to do it. So
as long as you're taking the necessary steps, like you said, you're doing the disinfection part, you're providing as much PPE to your employees as you possibly can. It's certainly, it opens you up to additional risk, but at the same time, the trade-off to that is one that has to be considered. And the reason I say that, and let me just dial back on that, there is ongoing debate, and as there will be for everything else, and try not to talk about coverage stuff too much, because that's how I get myself in trouble, as to whether or not the occupational disease provisions of workers' compensation would kick in for a non-emergency medical transportation operator for those states that aren't monopolized on the NEMT or on workers' comp specifically. There's a two-pronged test that has to be met, and I think that there is an argument to be made that non-emergency medical transportation providers get are more likely to meet that two-pronged test than some other industries. And so if you are actually going out and transporting individuals that are either COVID-19 positive or have a presumptive positive test, there may be you may be opening yourself up to additional workers' compensation risk that you otherwise wouldn't have. The thing about that is work comp stays with you. Any claims on under workers' compensation stay with you for about 3 years. So again, it's a trade-off.
Also, to that, and I'm waiting for this to come out. I haven't gotten it yet, but they're also sending us a waiver when someone will sign, a driver in that case, that helps the company, and the person who will do the transportation will be 100% aware of what he or she does. Okay.
Sure.
So there's something to go with it, to what you said, for the workers' compensation purposes. This is mainly, I would say, not even for profit. It's more for sustaining your employees, or maybe to helping out as well.
Yep. Keep them on payroll.
Yeah.
Awesome. Guys, it was a lot of really good info, and I appreciate the dialogue. A couple questions that popped up. Michelle, we are not going to discuss billing with EPACES here. That's, I think, specific to New York. Who are not going to go into that. That might be something good to address with Maggie, or I know there are plenty of solutions out there in terms of billing that might be able to help you if you're having trouble with that. So I would recommend looking into that, and I'm sure he can get you some help if you need it. Howard asked, does anyone have a policy and procedures for cleaning and sanitizing for their passengers and employees? And Ryan actually responded to check the CDC site, that their website has all the guidance that one should need. So thank you, Ryan, for that. I would agree. And I do agree that each company, it would be good to have a written procedure that you distribute to your drivers. I think, I think many of you would know more than me probably, but it seems like something that might limit liability and just increase safety to make sure everybody's on the same page.
And if you don't have one now, you sure shit better have one moving forward.
Yeah, certainly. And where to dispatch? Can you send a copy of the waiver that you mentioned? Gary, I don't know if that's something that you can share, but if so, we can certainly try to distribute that. Elena is also asking for a waiver of that copy. So once it's received.
And keep in mind, I think it's a great idea to share what's on the shelf. Venue issues need to be addressed And so while that waiver may be specific to actions in New York, I would not use it in its current form just on a blanket basis. So we just want to make sure that that's out there.
Definitely.
And Ryan has offered actually to post a specific link for us in the chat. So thank you, Ryan. We'll and if once we have that, we'll certainly share that in the recap packet. So Ryan, I appreciate the effort there. Gary, I have one more question for you, and we'll kind of move on. I want to move on to Danielle, and this is kind of actually a good segue into what Danielle does. When we were talking before the call, you told me, when we were talking about kind of you working remotely and what that looked like, you told me about your kind of voice over IP-based phone system and how you were able to get your phone set up remotely pretty easily for most of your staff. Take me through how important that was to getting your team to be able to work remotely and keep things moving.
Well, I think that's the main reason we stayed alive is ability to operate remotely. Otherwise, we would have to shut down. So if this happened 8 years ago, 10 years ago, we were probably completely off. So thanks having the software that we're using right now for dispatching purposes, billing purposes, and the phone system voice over IP, I could easily relocate all my employees from the office. It happened within, I would say, 4 hours within the first day when we decided to do it. It was as simple as taking the phones. Literally, you could take the actual phones home, which I have right now, and I can communicate to my office, or I can communicate to any of my employees through intercom as well. And as well as the software, when we all can see remotely to dispatch, to answer the phones, to do the billing, to do everything we need to do, the payroll, everything's integrated and everything web-based. So I think that's the huge help for us. So basically right now in my office, I have one person come in and out just to make sure if there's anything in emergency needed, but everybody working from home, and I don't see any issues right now so far.
Awesome. That is awesome to hear, and that's why we actually asked Danielle to join us today. So Danielle, I'm going to kind of segue to you. Danielle is joining us via phone, so you guys are going to have to look at my beautiful mug while we talk. But Danielle, so Danielle's an account executive with RingCentral, and as someone who has, used RingCentral and some other similar products, I can imagine a lot of your customers are really thankful right now to have a solution that works remotely with such little effort. Danielle, I think you might be muted. Yep, Danielle, you are muted. If I can, there we go. I unmuted you.
Can you hear
You're
me
good to
now?
go. We can hear you
Okay.
now. Hello.
Sorry, thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah, so I'm an account executive in the business space. And so, of course, no one expected any of this to happen. But now that it has, even for our own office, it was just as simple as taking our laptops and going home. So in the UCAS and telephony space, that's what we do. We provide voice over IP cloud services. So it's all in one. And just like Gary said, it doesn't matter where your employees are. It's easy to unplug your phone, take it home, plug it in. Everything's done over the internet. So I'm able to hold meetings. I'm able to share files. We have team messaging, anything that you need, as well as a number of integrations. So when it comes to working from home, ease of use wise, it takes a matter of hours to set up. Very, very simple. It doesn't take a lot of learning. A lot of companies that provide voice over IP do. They have implementation teams that help you. So it's a very, very easy setup, and you get all the information you need, links can download. So just to give you an example, I'm using the RingCentral app right now to speak with you. So it's easy to use, very, very simple when it comes to the setup part. And then there's 24/7 support with RingCentral. I can't speak with every company, but they have the support and everyone's ready to go. Because we're all in this together in this situation. So we're doing everything we can as a company to ensure that, everyone, including in the space that you're in, is able to work from home and keep your businesses going.
Absolutely. And yeah, I pulled up, you can't see this, but I pulled up my RingCentral phone app on my desktop here so everybody can see it. So I use RingCentral with a few different companies now. And for me, it was really as simple as, we ended up stopping work at the office. Our first remote day was last week, Monday. And for me, it was I picked up my computer, I took it home, and I plugged it in. I plugged in the headset that you all see me wearing, and it's as simple as dialing a phone, and I can get text messages and everything else. It's my phone is attached to my computer and my cell phone essentially, which makes it very simple to work remotely. Now, Danielle, what about some of the other advanced features that a lot of companies in this space might need? Things like having multiple extensions for different people, having ring groups, hunt groups, an IVR that answers when somebody calls to direct calls. What about those features? Are those things that you can get with a system like RingCentral?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything that you're talking about is going to be located in the admin portal. So it's just a link that any of your admins would have access to. The great thing is that there can be multiple admins because, of course, we understand that not more than one person may need access. So everyone has a direct dial number through RingCentral. Everyone can have an extension. You can have ring groups, call groups, hunt groups, as well as your IVR system auto attendant. And then it's much more advanced than that. So when it comes to what you need for your employees, we have the full analytics so you can monitor the KPIs of your team. You can also monitor the presence, as well as just make sure that you're able to manage while everyone's working from home. So you have full access to do that, and some very specific to your business items that you'll be able to make sure you have after hours greetings. So everything can be customized and set within the admin portal for you, specifically for your business.
Awesome. And you mentioned briefly some internal tools in terms of communicating or hosting virtual meetings. So I know those, I'm sure, are very important to your customers right now as well.
Absolutely. So within our office, RingCentral office offers RingCentral meetings. So there's a couple ways that you can do meetings. So you can host meetings up to 100. There are large meetings if you need more than 100 people joining per meeting. You can share files. Everyone can share their screen if they need to. So it's very easy to communicate. We have a lot of integration. So whether it's Gmail or Outlook, we can integrate so you can use it for calendars with your teams. And then when it comes to actually messaging, our team messaging, you can start meetings from there. So we have integrations with our own Glip, Slack, Office 365, Google, like G Suite, anything that you can think of, and then you can actually host meetings from there. So whether you need to do a quick meeting and let the team know, you can send out a quick message to everyone or whichever team that you want to speak with at the moment, or if you need to schedule a meeting, it's very easy to do. I host meetings with my clients all the time and that are potential RingCentral customers, and so it's very easy to set up and host those meetings for people.
Awesome. I do have a question. I think that would be very, everybody in my position would be interested. Do you guys have any special promotions right now that you can offer for people like us that would like to get RingCentral and try to use it for our office? Are there any specials right now that you guys have?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our discounting is due to the rep's discretion. So we have promotions that run, of course. I'm going to leave my information to be available so you can reach out to me to get those promotions if you feel like that's something you need for your business, because I'm really just here to educate you and make sure you know what your options are. For us, for example, for every 12-month contract that you sign up for, you get a month free. So that's something pretty standard. And then we also are doing price matching. So if you're looking at, voice over IP providers and you find that RingCentral is the best option for you, because we do have a pretty good reputation when it comes to just the service, then we can offer you substantial discounts as well as help meet those costs that you need. So we work with every business individually, and we want to make sure that we can get you set up if you feel like we're the right fit.
Okay.
And so Jim D, I do see your question. I'll loop that back with the Q&A since we've kind of moved on from that. Howard, I see your comment there. I'll make sure I highlight that later as well. Howard also mentioned RingCentral is an excellent product, and he recommends and offers it to all of his consulting clients. I actually do the same, so for what it's worth, you have two consultants both telling you that it's the best. And I'm sure Danielle is completely unbiased and would tell you the same. Danielle, one last question for you. I know, I have a bit of a telecom background, and I know switching providers can sometimes be a little bit scary to people. What's the process like to switch to a system like Ring Central? What does that look like?
Honestly, it's extremely simple. We have an implementation team that handles everything for you because we don't want it to be hard. We want it to be easy because we want to bring you on as a customer. So someone like me, the account executive, handles a lot of those things. So we just find out what you need. And then our implementation team helps make sure that we walk you through step by step getting it set up. So again, you can get set up in a day, within a day. Phones are plug and play that you get from us. So there's nothing that you have to do except for plug in the phones. You can plug them into Office, unplug it, take it home, plug it in at home. And then we also have a full classroom called Ring Central University that has everything that you could imagine that you need to do, 24/7 support. So it's very simple. I walk my customers through it all the time, and you can get set up immediately. And we have a lot of people doing that right now because we are working with all the medical field schools, getting them set up because they're in the same situation.
Awesome. Danielle, thank you so much. We hope you can stick around for Q&A. I know you have some other things going on. For everybody, we will be including Danielle's contact information along with kind of some links and general information about Ring Central in your recap. So if you do want to get in touch with Danielle and look at what it would look like to switch your business to Ring Central, we will offer that to you as a resource within that recap. Thank you, Danielle.
Yeah. Thank you. And just to be sure, I'm working with the leadership team for this call to get some kind of special discount in place that if they message me and let me know that they saw this webcast, that they'll get a special discount just because that's something Gary mentioned and some other people mentioned. So they're working on that for us right now.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you so much for doing that.
So,
all right.
Jonathan, before we segue out of that, I'm at home. You're at home. Pretty much everybody's at home. And the ability to function away from an office is huge. And it sounds like having that phone system is critical. I mean, and literally everything can live up there. Document storage, routing and scheduling, cameras, AI-powered camera systems can live up there. Right? We had a client that did a ride-along with a new driver yesterday because they were able to access that in the cloud from their basement. So it kind of goes back to things that seem like no-brainers now, but set that stuff up. Be able to work from home.
Yeah. Well, I know we'll talk about it a little bit later too, but being able to do that now while you can, while there's downtime, while there's special deals going on, so that you're prepared for if and when something like this happens again, or maybe it happens for a different reason. Right. Hopefully it happens for a different and less concerning reason, but or even if something happens in your life that forces you to work from home, or your staff or one of your key team members, whether it be an illness in their family or something going on in their life, an injury that prevents them from traveling, whatever it might be. Having these tools in place really just makes you that much more flexible and able to to do what you need to do. So moving on to my segment of things. So what many of you that know me don't know is a lot of my background actually comes from retail. I spent a lot of time in the wireless world, both in the business-to-business side, but also in the retail side before I moved into the kind of software and NEMT world and where I am now. And that's something I've kind of gone back to over the past 6 months or so and doing some work there. And unfortunately, along with that, I've done some contract work and have quite a bit of experience in performing reductions in force, RAFs, or cutting back on staff, for a variety of different reasons. So I wanted to provide kind of some best practices that I've learned from some experts in this over the course of my career, and things that I've been able to take to others to help them in a very difficult time. Nobody wants to lay off employees. That means you've slowed your growth. Your employees are what makes fuels your business growth. So it's understandably the last thing you want to do. And I know it sounds like the stimulus package, for those of you that haven't taken that type of action yet, hopefully it will give you some tools to prevent that. So if it is at all possible for you, we always encourage not to lay off your employees, both to maintain that relationship with them, because finding good people is hard, and because when this does go back to quote unquote life as normal, even starts to, you're going to want to be positioned to scale back to your normal business and probably beyond what you were doing before very quickly. So I wanted to share some quick tips in terms of performing a reduction force if it needs to happen. So your first step, identify your essential core. Who are the people that your business absolutely cannot function without? Maybe it's that key dispatcher or router that really makes things happen for you. Maybe it's your biller that's the only person that knows how to get your company paid. Maybe it's a couple drivers that are just, tremendous drivers that make your clients happy, that you need to make sure you keep a really strong driving force out there. Whatever it might be, identify that essential core and those most important people. Second thing, identify employees that can flex into other positions, whether it be, depending on what your requirements are for the types of trips you perform and in your state, office staff that can shift to driving because they have proper licensing, or if licensing isn't required for some of your trips. Again, office staff that could potentially shift there, that might be more difficult to replace than a driver might be. Identify those folks that can move. Maybe it's drivers that can flex into office positions, that you put them out there because they're an excellent driver or because that's what they prefer, but if that's how they can help you out for the time being. Or if you own other companies doing different things. I know there's a lot of spillover between transportation and home healthcare. The home healthcare business is booming in a lot of places right now, whereas transportation is down. Can you use some of those people in other ways to help other aspects of your business? So identify those folks that can flex and take that into account. And then identify and make every effort to keep the most valuable staff. So what I always did, and this is a painstaking and painful exercise, but I would always kind of go through and almost rank my people in terms of who I needed to keep in order to stay healthy. And a lot of it sometimes was based on if I knew that employee could be in a better position if something were to happen. So there are going to be, luckily, sounds like some excellent unemployment benefits coming to help folks out if they do need to be laid off. Again, that's should be always your goal, is that should be the last thing you do. But in that case, you obviously want to keep the folks that you provide the most value to them, and they provide the most value to you and your business. Another suggestion, keeping people that you can, if you can reduce them to part-time. In most states, they still qualify for unemployment benefits if there's a reduction from full-time to part-time. So instead of having 4 people and maybe I've got to lay off 2 and keep 2, perhaps I can move them all to part-time, allow them to still collect some unemployment benefits and still stay on with me as an employee. So that way, when my business does ramp back up, I can ramp them back up to full-time, even maybe have some overtime available if I have some short staffing problems, and put them back to and make them whole, but maintain my relationship with them, and allow that to hopefully not go sour, so that I can make sure, again, when time comes and I need to ramp back up, I can do that quickly and easily. Staffing is one of the most difficult things. It's one of the biggest challenges I hear from transportation providers, is finding good office staff and finding good drivers. So anything you can do to keep them in place, obviously tremendous. Last thing I want to talk about. I'm sorry, go ahead, Gary.
Jonathan, if you don't mind, I would like to add something from my personal experience, what we're doing.
Sure.
What I'm doing right now is I'm taking my drivers and I'm rotating them. I'm giving them a day at a time, so this way they can work a day, the rest of the day. Some days they claim unemployment, so at least they stay busy and they stay within the workforce. So I allow people, I rotate the schedule, I create a floating schedule based on people's ability to come to work, ability to work at all. We have a lot of single parents that their kids are at home, so they really can't go to work. So those are the ones that get the benefits from the state. They have 2 weeks that can be compensated 100% of their pay. And then you get 13 weeks of unemployment, which is 2/3 of their pay. I'm talking about the 2/3 of their pay. So we're trying to create a floating schedule where everybody, at least to some extent, involved into work. And you have your employees, they're next to you, they appreciate it. Okay. I can, as well as Jonathan mentioned, what I do is my dispatchers, most of my dispatcher staff have the appropriate licenses in the state of New York that they can provide non-emergency medical transportation. So that's what I do. I'm also, as Jonathan mentioned, in the school bus industry, so I'm utilizing my school bus drivers as well to help in wheelchair transportation right now because their license is appropriate, and do stretcher transportation versus them going on unemployment. Right now, the wheelchair and the stretcher transportation seems to be the one transportation mode that is mainly required versus the taxi. So taxi slowed down dramatically, where the stretcher and wheelchair transportation is still in demand to some extent. It did drop, but it's still there. So I think that's very important. Home health aides also involved with the home health industry, and we're utilizing people from non-emergency medical transportation to do the same thing and work from home health agency and utilize them there. So think of that. Be creative. Create a floating schedule so at least people can work day a week or 2 days a week, and compensate the rest of it. They can go for unemployment as well. So that's what we do right now in our company. Thank you so much for giving me.
And I think that that's a really, really good way to do it. And it's a complex problem, and it requires a creative solution. And it sounds like that's what Gary's done. I think it's an old wives' tale, but I'm pretty sure it's 100% accurate. Is that it's cheaper, or it's more expensive to hire somebody than to keep somebody on. And if you can keep your current employees happy, a happy employee is going to do good work for you, because, again, can't stress this enough. Once this thing is done, this whole business is going to explode, and you're going to require a lot out of them, because all of the deferred medical care is going to come rushing back. And if you've got to come back to ask somebody that you let go to come back and work for you 60 hours a week, they're going to say no. They're just straight up. They're going to tell you where you can take a hike too. So yeah, coming up with a creative solution to a complex problem, especially when it comes to staffing, is incredibly important. And happy employees are less likely to sue you. So, added bonus.
They need to be engaged. The main thing is to keep people engaged, constantly being engaged and communicating to your employees. That could be via phone, mail, emails. Constantly communicate to your employees. They need to know that you're still alive, that you're kicking. A lot of employees assume that you're going to go out of business, and you don't want to, show the sign of weakness to anybody. You do want to show that you are strong, you're still able and will perform after everything is done. So that's very, very important. That's what I'm doing, at least. Constantly in communication with all my employees, constantly trying to help people on a personal level as well if needed. We do identify. Yeah, that goes a long way, I believe. And that spreads among people. And like I said, the employees are the key to your success. So, and everybody know that. It's not something we just say, for the sake of conversation. It is truth. So we need to keep our employees and keep them happy and help them as well, if we're in the position to do so. So that's very, very important. Thank you, Jonathan.
That's awesome insight, guys. And I think going back to a couple of things that you guys mentioned, you mentioned some folks have childcare challenges right now, that they can only work part-time or can't work at all. Obviously, those are the folks that, they're in a tough spot, and whatever you can do to either give them a little bit of work here and there, or obviously those are the folks that, might make sense to take advantage of unemployment benefits. I do want to also mention, and I'm sure, like I said, the other webinar that's focused on this will cover it more, but one of the proposals that I believe I saw was in the stimulus that a deal has been reached on within the Senate is an enhancement to unemployment benefits, an additional up to $600 a week. So I think we'll see the details of that, but I anticipate what we're going to see is, you mentioned that, person can be kept whole for a little while and then they get a fraction of their pay. I think what's going to happen is people are going to be kept whole for longer, and that will make a tremendous impact on folks being able to, sustain themselves and get through this before things open back up. The other thing to note there is there's a distinct possibility that medical transportation demand could pick up before schools open. There's a chance that because of the timing that schools just never reopen. So you may have employees that you would normally be able to rely upon when you were at full capacity that you won't be able to because of that. So that's something to consider as well, and trying to keep as many folks on as possible so that you can respond to that. So Best Sunshine asked the question, how would businesses get the money to pay each part-time employees if 85% of it is down? I mean, an 85% decrease, obviously, you have to do what you have to do. That's that's very difficult to work with. Eric did mention some of the things that are going on, and there's other creative things in terms of trips. We have groups that are working with hospitals to move resources around. So we have folks that are getting masks from construction companies where the transportation company is moving those masks for them, or they're getting hand sanitizer. You've seen with all the different distilleries and such producing hand sanitizer that is going to hospitals and medical facilities. Sometimes that needs to be moved. Just general supplies, doctors coming in and out. Food is another big piece.
that one, moving doctors and nurses. So you got kids at home, and let's just say that you work in a dual income household and you have one vehicle. That vehicle probably needs to stay where the kid is, and one of the wage earners who works in a hospital or a facility has to get to and from the hospital. And so we're seeing some success working with hospital facilities to do some quick contracting to move their staff to and from their homes.
I would like to also add, you guys can contact your local school districts and communicate to them and see if you can transport what they're doing right now. They're transporting the homework between the kids' homes and the school district office. They don't want them to come in and out of the building. Also, the food delivery for the kids that go to school. So we'll have a lot of children that do go to school, and that's where they get their lunches. And if they get the lunches from school, they go hungry. So that's very, very important that the food gets delivered to them daily. Their parents are not financially able to provide the food. So what we do, we utilize in our school buses to provide the transportation. So a lot of districts do not have subcontractors, as myself, do utilize their own force. Their own force is very expensive. So they would hire subcontractors to go out and deliver the food or deliver the homework. Okay, so I would encourage you to contact local districts and see if can be any of assistance to them. And they do have funds. The schools they're the ones actually do have funds. It's already in their budget, so they can they can utilize those funds to pay for the things needs to be paid for. So I think that's an open avenue to generate additional income and sustaining business and keep your employees at least to some extent working.
And all of these things, all of these additional opportunities require one thing, and it's for you to pick up the phone and try to make that sell, offer your services up, and make sure that they understand why you, as opposed to, the guy down the street. So
Definitely.
Competitive differentiation.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. So to kind of recap to the question from Best Sunshine Transportation, how would you do that if you're 85% down? Check out the details of the stimulus packages. I'm sure those are already, as we've been preparing for this, are coming out, because I know they were talking about some offsets for those that are using the money for payroll, where that could become something that's very beneficial for you. So absolutely check that out, and see if that's something that can assist. The other option, 85%. I mean, the answer to your question is you can't. Without making any change. If you're 85% down and you don't do anything else, you absolutely aren't going to be able to keep your whole staff on even part-time. However, if you can make some changes, whether it be through things offered for the stimulus package, whether it's the SBA loans that are going to be offered through that, or whether it be finding new creative ways to generate revenue, those are ways that you could potentially do that. The other thing you could do is maybe you don't own a home health company, but you know of one nearby. Reach out to them. Let them know that you have staff that is used to working with the public that is ill or not in the best condition, and they have training to work with those folks. Some of those companies are struggling for aides. Some of you have drivers that are nurses as well. If you know of an employee that is a nurse that is also driving for you, reach out. They're going to need LPNs. They're going to need RNs. They need home health aides as well. But contact your other local businesses and find ways to share resources. Gary mentioned that he got the different cleaning supplies and such and acquired those from local vendors. And in our conversation prepping for this, he mentioned a lot of that actually came from schools that weren't using them. These aren't things that you just buy over the counter. It's things that are specially supplied to schools to be designed to disinfect at a high level. So reach out to your partners. Reach out to the people you have contracts with. Reach out to the people you don't have contracts with that you know of. Find ways to come together and work together, and you'd be surprised what awesome things can come out of it, both short-term for dealing with this, but also long-term and in creating long-term partnerships in ways that you can make your community and both of your businesses better. All right, we are running out of time. I want to quickly discuss furlough, and then I know Eric has some really good stuff. We actually talked about a lot of things in terms of moving forward, but I want Eric to be able to provide a quick recap on that, and I do want to open up to a general Q&A before folks have to leave us. So furlough. So what's a furlough? Essentially, a furlough is someone stays employed, but they're no longer working and they're no longer being paid. The difference between that and a layoff primarily is that they're going to continue to have their benefits. So those folks, if you continue to offer health benefits and you can do that, obviously that could be a tremendous help for your staff. Tim, I see your comment. So that's the difference. That person is still employed. They're obviously still going to have some loyalty to you since you did keep their benefits intact, which I'm sure many would appreciate in a time like this. So that is the big difference. So if you can do a furlough rather than a layoff, that is something that you should consider. I would recommend checking into the legal implications of that in your state, as they do tend to differ state to state. This was covered in a bit more detail on that webinar from Friday that Matt Doss ran, so I would recommend checking that out as well. But certainly something that is worth researching. I found that a lot of people don't know that option exists, and that is something that, for a temporary thing like what we anticipate this to be, could be a really good option to keep your employee in the best place possible, and also give yourself an opportunity to keep that relationship with that employee. They will still be eligible for unemployment benefits during that as well, at least in all the states that I've encountered furloughs in. That is always the case. All right, moving on from that, let's go back. Eric, I know you're working on some project with other industry leaders to kind of create some resources and some tips for NEMT providers to mitigate their risk if something like this, or even on a smaller scale, even within their own company or for a few people in their company, if something were to come up again, for companies to be able to better prepare themselves. So I'd like to turn the floor over to you to kind of talk a little bit more about that and what you have going on there.
So I'm going to breeze through because I think the Q&A part is a little bit more important than me, hearing the sound of my own voice. So just one of the things that you're going to hear is insurance industry buzzwords that are coming out, that always come out after some sort of crisis. So you're going to hear things like critical incident response, business continuity plans, fleet utilization studies, and some people may offer this to you at a fee for their services, and they'll be made out to be post-crisis mission critical. But we want to kind of dial that into what you can do moving forward, because there's a Chinese proverb, or it's a Chinese symbol. I'm going to mess it up, so I'm not even going to go to it. But there's opportunity here. You have some downtime to start planning for the next big thing, because like Jonathan said, it may not be another coronavirus, and coronaviruses aren't new by any means. They're not new. But there will be other crises, and whether or not it's something small that's related to you and your company individually, or whether it's something large that affects a larger geographic area or a larger population of people, this is an opportunity to plan for those things. And so when we think about what critical incident response and what business continuity planning is, and what a fleet utilization study is, kind of boiling that down to a lot of things that we've talked about today. And a lot of that has to do with the ability to work remotely. And Jonathan and Danielle talked about some of the great products and services that can help you get to the point where you need to be, so that when you do have these situations, if there is another shelter in place or another crisis that requires us to stay home, you can continue to function, at least the back office pieces of your business. The other thing is, you have a ton of data that's available to you. And over the last 2 weeks, even though you have had a ton of cancellations, you have a ton of data that is now in your possession that can help you understand where these trips came from and whether or not they were completed. So you're going to have good data on completion and cancellation rates that can help you focus on where you want to grow afterwards. It can also help you determine what your fleet level loading needs to be in times of crisis. And so, for example, the majority of the trips that we've seen go down are those standing order dialysis and cancer treatments, which are and other forms of medical care that can't be deferred. Knowing what asset loads you need to be able to complete those types of trips can help you plan to respond to incidents like this in the future. We talked about the ability to assess assessing your ability to function away from the office. And the other one is, this is a great time to reach out to your contracted organizations and let them know what you do. Have a thoughtful conversation and have a thoughtful analysis of what the true capabilities of your operation are. Put it on the shelf. Develop a capabilities assessment that helps you go out and generate additional business when this is done. Because you're going to know where your quality trips came from based on the data that you have available to you. And so I've always been a firm believer that any type of risk, and pandemic risk is not excluded from this, requires insurance and non-insurance risk treatment. Insurance treatment for pandemic risk doesn't really exist at this point. It might, but it's going to cost you. And so a cost-benefit analysis is going to have to be done when that comes in. So you have an opportunity to focus on non-insurance risk treatment to handle crisis situations. And, you know, there will be things that come out of this that are positive. And one of those things is a better understanding about what your individual operations capabilities are in times of turmoil.
Awesome. I think that's awesome advice. And I think right now is, you know, is the time to do that, right? I mean, I've heard from a lot of companies, you know, right now it's crazy. And, you know, I don't know what to do, but I think there's going to be a leveling off, or that probably has already happened for a lot of companies, where you've kind of put your plan together for what this looks like for the next 2 to 6 to 8 to 12, whatever weeks this might be. You know, we don't know, obviously. And I think there are a variety of expert opinions. You know, I've heard everything from, you know, we're going to be good to start returning to normal in a few weeks to we're going to be ready to return to normal in 9 months. So I don't think anybody really knows.
I skipped that day at doctor school, so I don't have an opinion.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of where I am. And I've read so many opinions from qualified people, and the fact that there is such a variety of opinions tells us that nobody really knows. So I think you know, with that being the case, you know, this is a time to prepare yourself for moving forward once you've executed on what you need to do moving forward. All right, so I would love to move on to kind of an open Q&A. I want to touch on a couple questions that were asked prior that we can touch on. I'll take the video off of Eric. I'll put the pressure on me not to do anything stupid. All right, Jim asked, Gary, did I hear you correctly stating that New York State has suspended DOT inspections? I don't recall hearing that, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to answer that.
Yes, all New York State DOTs are suspended until further notice.
Okay, perfect. Howard made a point.
All the physicals as well.
Oh, perfect. That's awesome. It's good to hear. Howard, you mentioned to be careful of the waiver, as HIPAA and PHI issues can come up later. That is very good insight. Always keep track of. Always be watching for PHI situations. That's good. And Howard, before I forget, I'm right in your backyard now. We should probably connect. Best Sunshine asked, most companies have high monthly insurance. Is there a way for it to be stopped for a month? I'm going to kind of refer you back to our recap. Eric, early in the presentation, and unfortunately you may have joined us late, but went through some of the things that are happening where essentially you know, they're working with carriers to create things that are more flexible and can allow you to lay up your policies while also not having to turn in your plates and things of that nature. So I think you'll see more to come on that, and you'll have some information about that in the recap that we send out. Tim asked if anyone has a real example of transporting doctors and others, and also the school systems with actual dollar numbers to it. Please send some info. We will try to get something for you in the recap. If not, if anybody could reach out to Tim and connect with him, that would be fantastic. So we are on about a 10-second delay, so I'll give a little bit of time here. But any other questions anybody has for any of us? Danielle is still with us, and we have myself, Eric, and Gary here. So any questions that you think any of us can help with, please feel free to fire away. Like I said, I'm going to give it about 30 seconds to a minute before I give up on you, just because I know there is a bit of a delay here.
I believe I would like to add to something while we're waiting. What Eric was saying, I think it's very important to take something out of this. Hopefully this never happens again, but if it does happen, I believe, for example, for myself, what I'll take out of this is remote work is very, 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 very important. So I think we should all learn from that. I believe having something as Rig Central and a software for dispatching and and not actually dispatching for your entire operation is very essential. So this way you don't have to stop. The physical office is not going to be as important as long as you have your vehicles maintained and you have a You can have a mechanic come and work one at a time. You can split the shift 24 hours into 12-hour shifts, and one person will come in the morning, the other person will come in the afternoon, and all the vehicles will be kept up and running. And you have the cleaning crew coming and sanitizing all the vehicles. The most important thing is the keeping your money coming in, will be the billing. So the billing should never stop. So that's something that, or dispatching, right? Or communicating with your drivers. So having a system that allows you to communicate with your drivers. Like, for example, what our company does, what I do, I have all my employees have company cell phones that we give, they're all affiliated with the vehicle. So they all get their notification through the phones and updates and what everything is going on, as well as communication with them. We have cameras inside the vehicles, so we can always see. We can call them and ask them questions, make sure everything's okay. So I think that's remote work becomes an essential piece to every business. And the more and more I see in non-emergency medical transportation, is going to become more and more, especially after this. And I myself will be considering to have satellite offices in the case of something like this happen. For example, where I'm from right now in Buffalo, we had issues where we have snowstorms, and people that are not prepared for it could go out of business because we can shut down. We had issues when we were shut down for a week at a time. And people that had no generators, simple as generator, would completely lose their business because everybody else would working besides them. So those are the things you have to take, in consideration and learn. And so next time you don't get cut with this is easy. So I think that this will be a very good lesson for me myself, and I think for other providers as well, as far as being able to work remotely. Work remotely is essential, very important right now. Um, so that's my opinion. I think that's everybody should think about that.
Absolutely. So Outreach HSC in Florida asked, can you create a mailing list and send us more info as the situation progresses? Absolutely. Anybody that registered, if you received an email or you saw us on social and you registered for the webinar, your email, I posted an email, stas at isi-technology.com. So I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the folks at ISI, Gary, Stas, and their team kind of helping with the technical side of this. We're using their YouTube channel, obviously, and use a lot of their technology to distribute invitations and such. So they really made this possible. So a huge thank you to the ISI team. But if you send an email to stas at isi-technology.com, just let him know that you're not sure if you're on the list and you'd like to be added. He can get you added to that list. But it looks like we don't have any other questions. So thank you so much to everybody who joined us today. We really appreciate it. If there is anything else that you think we can do to help, we will provide contact information for everybody that joined the panel. So if there's something specific to our expertise that you think we could potentially help with, please feel free to reach out, and we'll be happy to provide as much assistance as we can through this. As others have mentioned, we're going to get through this together, and we're going to come out better on the other side. So we are really inspired by what we've seen from all the different folks out there helping each other and helping their communities. And we look forward to seeing more and more of that and continuing to see that after this is over. So thank you all for all of your efforts, for taking the time to chat with us today. But I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up and hopefully talk to you all again very, very soon. Have a great rest of your day, and best of luck to everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you.